Welcome to the Forever 80s podcast, hosted by Liz Worth, where we talk to fans, artists, collectors, and more about all the things we love about the 1980s. Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is Liz Worth, and I am here today with David Tseng, founder of MorrisseySolo.com, an open forum for fans of Morrissey and the Smiths. Welcome, David.
Hi. Hi, Liz. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's nice to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah. So you have a very robust online forum all about Morrissey and the Smiths, but you didn't start 100% online, right? You started with a fanzine.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I can go over a little bit of the history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love talking about fanzines too. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I started before the internet kind of took off as a fanzine. So this was 1991. I started a fanzine with another fan, Russ. He's from Arizona. I was in LA area. And we were just kind of new fans. We just got out of high school. We kind of met in Manchester for a Smiths convention. So we were just huge Smiths fans. And then we kind of spent some time there just learning about the music, the scene there. We were kind of interested in the music scene. So we started just a one-off fanzine just about the music scene in Manchester. But then we kind of focused on our main interest, which was Morrissey, because Morrissey started his solo tour in 1991, and we kind of followed some dates on that in the US, and then just to talk to some fans, got some stories, photos, just put out an initial fanzine, and then it was pretty popular. We sold out of the first one, and then did a second edition with the tour in 1992. He toured again with Your Arsenal, and then it continued to get better. We did the fanzine on a computer, which was kind of new at the time. So I did it out on a word processor, and then did some page layout with the old program. But we printed it out though, at a printer, and it got some notice too. Actually, Sire Records at the time used it as a promo, so that was exciting. Then it continued on. We did a few more issues, and then after that, I think we kind of both graduated college. We were kind of doing different things, and then I was gonna kind of stop at that point, but then the web, internet started getting popular, and I was just kind of learning about that. My kind of training or my education is in computer science. So I was always curious about using media and entertainment, kind of fusing the two. So I just started just a basic website with some news, just kind of continuing on the fanzine. The fanzine was called Senior Life. So I just did a basic website just with some basic news. But then I thought, well, this is kind of exciting. There's a lot of stuff we can do on the internet that was kind of painful with the fanzine. Putting together a fanzine was a lot of work still. Even if it was on the computer, we still have to talk to people, gather all the data, print it up, go to the printer and order a bunch in advance, and then actually physically mail them out. So it did take a lot of time. So with the website, you can kind of skip a lot of that stuff, right? It's immediate almost into the whole world, and you get feedback right away too. So I was kind of interested in learning about where this is going. At the time, this was 1997, the website started, so pretty early on in the kind of world of internet. So it immediately got pretty popular. There were a lot of Smiths sites around at the time. Nothing, even though Morrissey was, active solo. This was Maladjusted. His album was coming out. He'd been solo for about 7-8 years. So he was still active, but it was weird to me that all the sites around were kind of about the Smiths and just focusing on the Smiths' older archival stuff. But so I kind of want to just focus on kind of what's current, what's now. So I started the site Morrissey Solo, and it's kind of evolved from there. But the spirit has remained the same, like just a lot of interaction with fans, kind of current news, updated news. That's kind of what I was always interested in, just what's going on. That was always kind of difficult back then. Like I'd have to go get the NME was popular at the time, but it would be, to get to the US, there'd be a bit of a delay, maybe a week or so. So just with the internet, it was just such a revelation, I think, because everything was so immediate.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, I'm curious because I used to buy fanzines, and that was how I'm in Canada. So, it always seemed like we were a little bit behind everybody else in terms of finding things out and getting information. And it's not, it's not quite the same as the US, and it's not quite the same as Europe, right? Even though we have similarities. So for me, being a teenager in the 90s, fanzines were a huge source of information about music, because we also didn't have MTV here, right? We had a station that was similar called Much Music, but it was still a little bit of a struggle sometimes to find music like the Smiths or like Morrissey. And fanzines were such a key way, I think, for a lot of people to find music that wasn't necessarily top of the charts or super mainstream. And I'm curious, how were people finding out about the Smiths and Morrissey at the time? Like, was it mainly fanzines? Because I remember in the 90s, I only found out about the Smiths because someone put This Charming Man on a mixtape for me, and that was how I first heard the Smiths here. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of that kind of sharing among siblings or friends. I think at the time, as I recall, they were actually pretty popular. I'm from LA. They're really popular in LA because of we had an alternative station called K-Rock, KROQ, and they played all the kind of the 80s alternative popular acts, like Depeche Mode was big. The Smiths, Morrissey, New Order, Pet Shop Boys, things like that. So it was actually pretty popular back then, but that was in LA. So yeah, the rest of the country, I think it would be hard. College radio maybe was bigger back then, as I kind of recall. I didn't really listen all that much, but there was that. They did get some stuff on I guess the alternative MTV, that there was a show called 120 Minutes. So that's where we would see debut videos of these alternative bands, which was always exciting to me. I remember it was like on a Sunday night, pretty late. We'd just stay up and watch these new videos from, most of them from England that kind of I liked, the alternative scene. So yeah, it was kind of probably similar to being in Canada. We just didn't get the information. It was kind of hard. That's right. So I don't really recall fanzines. Maybe I wasn't that into them as much. But I know in England at the time, there were some Smiths related fanzines, but not so much in the US for that. So yeah, it wasn't too big where I was, the fanzines, but I did find it very compelling though. Once I did get the English fanzine, it was called Smiths Indeed, the one I got, really good. So that was a big influence. So just getting that was just really kind of magical or inspiring, just to see that, oh wow, there's actually fans that love the music of the Smiths as much as I do, and are as interested in all these little details. So in that sense, the fanzine was really something that inspired me. Yeah.
What is it about the Smiths and Morrissey that you liked so much to begin with?
Let's see. Well, I guess the kind of the working class music was just nothing. I kind of the spirit of it was kind of punk, but the music was actually enjoyable for me, like really technical and yeah, the working class spirit I think is something I just hadn't heard in music before. Like I was listening to, just kind of what was around on the radio, what was popular. I mean, it was still, just the 80s itself. It was all pretty good. I mean, I like Prince. That was big for me. But kind of the English music, I just didn't hear until friends at high school kind of introduced me to K-rock and the bands there. And then I really got interested in that. So it's kind of that whole spirit of kind of punk, but actually the music's actually really good. The lyrics were, really blew me away when I first kind of listened to their songs and then got album by album, just kind of learn more about them, the Smiths, and then I learned more about Morrissey and the interviews, and there's a whole world there. So he has a lot of influences that he talks about in his interviews, which is really a whole new world for me too, like English old kind of television shows or movies, which I just never hadn't really been exposed to. So that was a whole world in itself. And a lot of literature, things like that were inspiring also. Kind of the whole world of Morrissey, which he mentioned the Smiths create their own world. And I kind of dove into that. It is its own world. So, and there's a lot of depth to it too, I think. Like on the surface, yeah, there are the songs, but there's like a rabbit hole you just go into and kind of keep learning more. And I just kept getting more interested in it and have just been a huge fan and just interested since. And now he's doing a new tour this year. He called it the 40 years of Morrissey. So it's been 40 years since he started. So that's that's quite a legacy already, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many questions about all of these things. When you talk about looking at the influences that Morrissey has talked about and this whole world around the music, I guess I'm curious, like, is that part of the appeal? Because I know that sometimes, they are very intellectual. It's a very cerebral band. And is that part of the appeal for you, is that you can listen to the music, but it leads you to so many other cultural touchstones?
Yeah, definitely. Even just the other music, like Morrissey is very opinionated on different types of music. So, exactly, like he'll mention a band or an artist and which I may have been familiar with but don't really know too much about, and then I would look more into that and then say, oh wow, that's really cool. But a lot of like influences from the 70s or 60s he talks about, so that stuff I was not familiar with, especially in the UK. So yeah, the influences are really just continuing on. He, even to this day, he doesn't do that many interviews these days, but what he'll do in concerts is he'll have a backdrop for each song that he's playing, and it'll be maybe a different picture or person. Kind of like how, the Smiths had on their sleeve, they had different cover stars for each release. That was always interesting to me. Like, who is this person? What did they do? Why did Morrissey choose this person? So yeah, it is really kind of how much you want to get into it. Yeah, it's like maybe more casual fans may see the album cover and think, oh, that's kind of cool, but not really delve into the influence of it. But kind of the fans I'm with on the site and with the fanzine, they were always interested in things like that, like who is this person? Where's this picture from? Is it what movie? Is it from a movie? Is it yeah, why did Morrissey choose this? Probably it's kind of goes deeper into the mind of Morrissey, almost like we're kind of seeing what goes through his mind. Why uh there's just so much like he talks about, and not just in the songs. So it's yeah,
Hmm.
like I mentioned before, it's kind of just part of this whole world that he's created. And very, he's maybe that's why also, like, as a fan, we appreciate Morrissey because he's such a fan of all these different influences himself. So I think he understood that, and we understand that. Like even before the Smiths, he did a New York Dolls fanzine. He was a big fan of them. So he ran a fan club for the New York Dolls for a while. So so I think he understands, that that sort of spirit of being a fan. So that's something we connect with, I think, all the fans.
Hmm. That's so interesting. And I think too, yeah, that, this idea of having references, right? Having all these influential references that can be so subtle sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think there's something, I don't know, I often wonder, I'd have to, it's something I'd have to look into deeper, but I feel like there are certain generations, especially people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, who have so many of these little references where you might wear a certain jacket or have your hair a certain way or put on a certain record, not because you want that jacket, but because it reminds you of something that's on an album cover or that someone wore in a music video or something like that, right? Like you can, and I think a lot of us who like certain bands from certain times do things like that. And it's like if someone else gets it and recognizes it, then you're on the same wavelength, right? It becomes an identifier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely with the Smiths, there was a little bit of that. Morrissey was known kind of for his hair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were always kind of a normal look. So that was what struck me as a little different than maybe the other 80s things that were popular. So they were almost kind of a contrast to what we liked about the 80s, almost like the videos. They refused to make videos for a while, music videos. But eventually they did.
Mm-hmm.
And they found a good director, I think, and it did add a new kind of dimension to Morrissey and the Smiths. So he's kind of stubborn sometimes with technology and kind of the trends of the day, but it all came together. I think like this, yeah, like even now, I think he's more open to different influences, like using synthesizers. He was kind of against that for a while, since that was popular in the 80s. Like another source of influences is he'll play, instead of an opening band nowadays, for his concerts, he'll show videos of bands or music or different sources. And so one of them was Human League. I noticed this was either last year or a couple of years before. So that was kind of interesting. I was like, well, that seems like something he wouldn't normally be have been cited as an influence years ago, but now now we're seeing kind of different. He's maybe open to different influences. So it's kind of evolving. Like we all evolve. Fans have evolved. He's evolved, I think. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like just the appreciation for the 80s, I think, is something that we all have, I guess, with the idea of the music video generation. Like I'm not I don't watch too many videos these days, I guess. I think they still make them, but there's something kind of unique when you see an 80s video. So yeah, even though maybe back then I wasn't that excited about it, but now looking back, yeah, it's I find them very entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very specific time, right? When we had MTV in the US and Much Music in Canada, that you could tune in and watch hours and hours and hours of music videos, and you'd wait for your favorite band to come on, right? Yeah. And now, you can go on YouTube and you can watch videos that people are making currently, but it's not quite the same when it's on demand. There's something about, I think, having the patience of really being a fan and waiting for that one video to come on that you've really been wanting to see. Right. And again, that's a very short period of time culturally that we had that experience.
Right. Kind of reminds me of, like listening to the radio too. Like you would kind of listen for a song or something. We don't have that anymore. Yeah. Everything's on demand and there's like millions of things we can listen to. So, right.
Yeah. So, and you could, you can curate your experience now, but previous to that, you couldn't, right? Someone else was curating it for you. And so I think we also had a different collective experience around music because, you might be sitting in the living room at the same time as your best friend who lived on the other side of town, and you're both waiting for that same video to come on, and then there might be all these other people who are also watching that same thing as you at the exact same time. But now we don't have that so much, right? And it's, in some ways it's great. You can choose your own adventure when it comes to music, and find what you're looking for. But I also don't know if that sometimes prevents you from maybe discovering other things as well in a more organic way, or again, having these collective experiences that, I think we're just unique to a different time. But
yeah, I really like those 80s videos. I mean, they had a certain style, like just, maybe it's just, the kind of the spirit of it is just, some of it seems kind of amateurish or cheesy, I guess you could say, but very dramatic, but very original, I thought, just some of the things they would think of, just kind of crazy, like backgrounds or scenes. And it's like different nowadays. They maybe wouldn't do something like that these days. You just wouldn't, it's just more professional now or something. I don't know. Yeah, I kind of like that garage type, or kind of that punk ethic I mentioned before, is just kind of just do it yourself and get it out there. Not really have a bunch of people plan it out or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, a lot of artists, at least artists that have someone investing in them now, a lot of them have other types of training, right? Their videos are choreographed and they're often very slick. And in the 80s, people didn't know what they were going to do sometimes when they're making a video, right? It was a little bit more spontaneous and experimental. And I think that's why it has that kind of aesthetic to it, right? There's something that might feel a little bit more genuine, but I don't know if I'm being biased in saying that because I really like that era. But yeah. So what is it about Morrissey himself? Is it, do you consider yourself a fan from the perspective of Morrissey and his music, or is it Morrissey as a person? Is it both? What is it about this figure?
I think it starts with the music for sure. But it's both. Yeah. I'm definitely interested in what he's doing still. That's why I think that's why the site's so popular still, it's been 26 years since I started the site, so it's still very popular. And I think other people are very interested in what he's doing or what he says, even though he hasn't put out any kind of new music, not much in the last few years. People still visit. He's toured a lot. He's had issues with the record labels, so he hasn't been able to kind of work out the contract and things like that. So yeah, that's been an issue, but people are still interested, and he's still playing live. So I'm interested in both. Yeah. Kind of what, we mentioned before with the videos and the kind of the whole 80s, the type of band, Morrissey is very much from that time, right? They started in early 80s. Smiths were popular in the mid 80s. Then they broke up, and then Morrissey started his solo career in 1988. And what I found unique about Morrissey, I'd say, is he's kind of just the music artist. That's what he is. He doesn't do like a lot of what artists nowadays, they're kind of market themselves as maybe even acting or merchandise, things like that, like a perfume brand or something like that, commercials or um, just different, yeah, sort of fields. But he's always just been music. That's just his thing. Like he hasn't really done much social media on even on his own stuff. He's just kind of old fashioned, I guess. But yeah, I think it's always been the music. That's been the most important thing to him and to us, to me as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely the music is kind of the primary thing. And he is into fashion and things like that. But not as much as other people, I'd say. That's not really a big thing. Um, yeah, it's more about the music. I think
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's always the most important thing.
It always seems like there's been a very rabid cult following around the Smiths and Morrissey. And I know that other bands have very devoted fans as well, but I can't help but feel that there's something that's different about Smiths fans and Morrissey fans.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's the loyalty is very, very hardened. Like a lot of people there for life, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when they came along when I was in high school and teenage, and the songs just really hit me back then. So I kind of became a fan for life, I think, back then even. So yeah, like once it's kind of ingrained in your soul almost at that age. um, I guess some people do grow out of it, but I never did. I mean, I know a lot of people haven't. Um, Even if they have this, sometimes they'll come back to it. So, yeah, in the Morrissey world, I do see that a lot. Like people will leave, um, whatever life circumstances, but they will come back also. Um, a lot of them just stay around. But through the site, 26 years of running it, there's a lot of people have come and gone. Um, so yeah, I do see that. And
Mm-hmm.
especially with the recent controversies with Morrissey and his kind of views, political views, it's I'd say that it's controversial. So some people did get turned off by that. And I think in the last couple of years, just from my experience, it does feel like a lot of older Smiths fans did get turned off. Some people were selling their records even. Um, so it isn't 100% everyone along the way. So something like I think just a career span of an artist for 40 years is just really hard to maintain and just to kind of keep relevant. So um, so he kind of just remains a controversial person. So with and he'll lose some fans, but maybe some will come back. But yeah, in the current time, it does. I think he's struggling with it, and uh, yeah, we're seeing that kind of the cancel culture he mentions is really affected him on some of the things he's controversial things he said. Um, Maybe he could have done a better job explaining some of the things, but that's kind of part of his stubbornness, I think, sometimes is that he wouldn't explain some things. So in kind of this social media culture, it could be a little dangerous. um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. So yeah, I guess in general, yeah. There are a lot of loyal fans. I mean, I'm still interested. Uh, but yeah, there have been some that have dropped off for sure.
Has it ever been a challenge for you to stay aligned as a Morrissey fan and as someone who's running this large community about him
A
because of those controversies? Does that ever kind of blow back to you or?
little bit, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. There have been some. like I don't know if you followed the site, but this was about 10 years ago. I actually got kicked out of a concert because he doesn't like the site, from what I understand, because of the open forum nature and I think it's the criticism that appears a lot. It's some people are very critical. I mean, Morrissey himself is a very critical person of sometimes maybe negative, a lot of negativity. And I think I kind of just let things go. I prefer not to censor things like that. So there are maybe naturally some of his fans would be very negative and critical. Maybe some have turned kind of against him, right? Because of all the controversial or things he said. I find it all very interesting, different sides of arguments. So I kind of just let things go. But as someone who kind of runs the platform, I think he might blame me for some of these things he sees, even though most of it's pretty positive, I think. But some of it can be kind of harsh. So maybe at the time he saw that and still feels that way. I always felt like he kind of grew up and was more familiar with the music press, like different in England. There were a lot of music papers like Sounds and NME Music. Was it Melody Maker? The Face. There were so many. So he did a lot of interviews, kind of controlled things through that. But with the internet, that was a big shift, I think. And the site itself was, because I ran it kind of uncensored. I think he feels like it kind of damages him. So he never he doesn't really talk much about it anymore. But at the time, it did feel like he was upset about that.
Okay. So how did he kicked you out of a concert? That's what happened because you run the site?
I went to Denmark. Just I don't know, wasn't really on speaking terms with him. But I'd gone. I just planned to visit. He was doing a concert in Denmark, and so I just planned a trip for that. And I think I mentioned to maybe a couple of people I was going, but somehow they identified me, and then they just told me I should leave. So basically, it kicked me out of the concert with my friend too. So, I guess I got the message that I'm not welcome, but I don't know if you can actually kick someone out if I'm not doing something. That's always kind of weird to me. I mean, I don't know if you can. I paid for a ticket. I don't.
Yeah, and you went all that way.
I'm not there. I wasn't there to bother him or anything. Yeah. So yeah, there's been stuff where he's been upset at me. And I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I don't know. I don't really get in arguments, but for whatever reason, his managers would get upset at me too for something. So I've had people call me, yell at me, death threats, things like that. So yeah, it's been an interesting time running the site. Things have calmed down recently, though, in the last several years. I think social media. I mean, maybe he realizes that these people are negative on the site, but actually, social media they do say a lot of negative things also. So it's not really that unique. It's just when you open things up, you're going to get all sorts of opinions, right? So yeah, I think technically the site is way better than it was. It's just continuing to improve. I like to keep working on it. So I think we're just in a relationship where maybe he won't say anything about it, but he's not going to attack it or anything. It does, I think, keep people interested in a way. I don't think it hurts. I think it's the best archive for an artist. Like, I don't know. I haven't seen too many a lot of sites I know kind of were created, in the 90s or early 2000s, but not too many have lasted, I don't think. especially with social media groups, Facebook groups, Reddit, things like that, have kind of taken over. But I think the site is kind of unique. It's weathered all that. I guess forums were kind of the original social media, I feel. So in a way, we're kind of nostalgic for forums. So they're still popular. There's a lot we can do with a customized website that we can't do with these other social media kind of templates, or definitely with the archive. Like I've archived every page, every post going back to the start of the site. Pretty much, you can still see it. There are something like 2.5 million posts that through the years, which is pretty good. It's a lot, yeah.
That's a lot, yeah. Have given, because when I'm hearing this story about Morrissey reacting in this way, and even going to the length of removing you from a concert, I feel like that would be really hurtful for a lot of people. And I'm trying to think of how I would feel if I was running a fan site for someone and that happened to me. And so I'm wondering, has there ever been a time when you considered just closing the site to kind of, avoid all this conflict?
Right. Yeah, there was even like a couple of years later, another thing came up where I thought it kind of blew over, so I went to a concert recent, kind of nearby, just to check it out. But I got kicked out of that one too. Some bodyguard identified me, or security.
Wow.
But it came out that after that, it came out that one of his bodyguards was going to sue Morrissey because this came out in a lawsuit. Because the bodyguard was told to beat me up or something, like find me, beat me up, or even possibly, it was not like an implied death threat. I don't think it was really. The manager kind of just mentioned it, but it came out in a lawsuit, and so that. And then TMZ picked up on it, so it kind of became big news. Yeah, so then it becomes, well, I'm getting kind of a threat from physical threat from someone, just for doing the site. Yeah, do I want to keep doing this website? Is it worth it? Is it like, why am I doing this? Like, I think it took me a while to process all of that. Like, I had some help just talking to like a coach who helped me through that. But I think what happened was, like, I kind of, as a fan, I started this site and fanzine just to kind of, as an appreciation for this artist, but also if I can get closer to the artist, in a way, that'd be kind of cool. That wasn't really the main reason, but and I kind of had that in mind. I think in the back of my mind was like, I'm doing this. It is about Morrissey, the site, but it took me a while to figure out, like, well, the site itself is actually really good. Like, it stands on its own. Yeah, Morrissey's the subject, but I put in a lot of work into it. I work on this. I've been working on this for so many years. I put in at least 2 hours or so a day on it. There's a lot of maintenance. I do all the editing, moderation. I have help. I have a lot of help now with moderation, kind of content editing, but kind of set up this whole system, all the technology, keeping up with security and upgrading, redesigning the site takes a lot of time, and also to preserve all the old site pages all at the same time is something I wanted to do. So I think I kind of separated that. So yeah, now I don't really think so much of what he thinks about the site. I know it's a good place or archive, and really one of the best, I think, music for an artist music sites that exist with the amount of detail, because Morrissey has so many influences and things to talk about that maybe some other artists wouldn't have. But yeah, I don't know if there's other sites that compare. I'd be curious, but I haven't really seen too many that have lasted this long. Mm-hmm. So I think the site stands on its own. Yeah. And so just to realize that it's my work also, like it's not really necessarily just about his work. But my work's important. So kind of just giving myself that, I can kind of separate all of that. So as long as I still find Morrissey interesting, I'll keep doing it, I think. And I think I'm still very interested in what he's doing up to. Still really kind of fascinated, just like people like on his recent tour in the UK. He has one more show coming up, but yeah, now just reading about, I'll put up a story about how kind of like after every concert there'll be a story and people can comment on the story about what the set list was. They'll add their photos, what he said, all very interesting. So we're kind of documenting his history in real time, which I think is really something you don't really see anywhere, this amount of detail. So we have all that. So I think just something like that is just very interesting for me as a fan. Like I had followed a lot of the shows in 1991, 1992. I did all the US shows in 1992. But after that, it was kind of hard to follow all the shows. But in a way, with the internet, with the website, I can kind of just be there, just following through the site, right? Like, and I think a lot of fans feel the same way. They kind of want to know everything about him. So this is a really good way to do that. Because otherwise, before, without the internet, we would do the fanzine, but it would come out months later, and you'd maybe learn about the show, what happened at the show months later, and we'd have to compile the information from people, and we would be missing a lot of stuff. So yeah, so I think the site has brought in a lot of unique stuff and kind of a unique dimension to Morrissey himself that he may not have thought of himself or would have done himself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. One thing that I always find interesting about Morrissey's shows is, and I think this also happened at Smith shows too, is this phenomenon of people wanting to jump on the stage and hug him. Why do people want to be so close to him?
Oh yeah. It's become kind of a tradition, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It still happens. Like it just happened the other day. Yeah. That's what makes the shows dynamic, I think. Like we don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to go up there. I think it's part of the whole fan experience, the interaction with Morrissey. You know, he'll shake hands at concerts, and that's always exciting to people, just to have that few seconds. But yeah, going back to the Smiths, right? People would jump on stage, kind of dance a lot, and it would be. I guess there's things like security these days, so it doesn't happen as much. They kind of get people off, but people still do try to get on. It's kind of like a challenge, and I think just showing their appreciation, and he appreciates it. That it's just kind of unique, also for an artist. Like what artist has that? Like, not too many that still do that. 40 years later.
Yeah, like, I mean. I don't see it. Not that I go to every single show out there, right? So I'm not the be all end all of this opinion, but yeah, I mean, when I go see bands, I don't see that happen.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, even though people might love those bands in their own way and they have their own devoted fans, but yeah, it seems like it's definitely like you say, a tradition and a phenomenon, and it keeps going. And It's
I think he has, he's always has new fans too, right? There's always newer, younger fans that come in. So maybe they haven't gone on stage before, or so it's new to them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always new people. So so it's kind of a nice experience once you've done it. uh, Kind of exhilarating, I think, to be on stage. I did it when I was younger. uh, it's just a fun thing to do. Almost uh, safety, is important, but they can get kind of rough, the security. So
Hmm.
uh, so yeah, it's changed a little bit, I'd say, but still people do it. Yeah,
Hmm.
they'll risk getting hit or yeah, clawed at. um, and that's maybe part of the punk ethic too that still exists. Like a little bit of danger is
Hmm.
part of the show. Is exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think for some fans too, it's like the willingness to just take the risk, right? If you could take the risk and have the experience, then it's worth it for some people.
Yeah, yeah.
So you got to go on stage at one time.
Yeah, this was when I was much younger.
Hmm.
Uh, just like yeah, I would travel around with a lot of fans, and we would all try to do it. uh,
Okay.
it was fun, yeah. And,
Yeah.
just to get, I think it's just a way of showing appreciation. Like um, even back then, Morrissey did have kind of like a almost godlike, right? Like we just appreciate him so much. We just want to shake his hand, touch him, whatever. Yeah, because back then it was like the Smiths had broken up, but we hadn't seen this. I got into them right when the Smiths kind of before they broke up, but they were about to tour. Supposedly rumors were, but then they broke up, so I never got to see them. So then we had to wait a couple of years, and then Morrissey toured. So kind of all that time of excitement building up, left over from the Smiths days to a solo career was just the energy back then was yeah, just off the chart, I think. So yeah, we would just do crazy stuff. Yeah. Yeah, being young too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing harmful, but uh just kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's something very endearing about seeing fans want to be so close to someone that they admire, right? Just to get a hug. Like it's very innocent.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when you see that happen, it doesn't, again, I'm just saying this as someone from the outside looking in, but it looks like it comes from a place of love, right? It's not coming from a place of violence or
Right.
anything like that, right? So yeah, there's something
Yeah,
about
exactly.
yeah, about Morrissey that really seems to attract that. Like people want to be close to him, even if sometimes he can be difficult or a challenging person, right?
Right.
Yeah, and a challenging figurehead, but there's still something that is so attractive about
Yeah, I think
him.
you're right. Like love is kind of the basis of it. Like we just love the music, we love
Mm-hmm.
um his words. And yeah, right. That's basically it, I think, is that
Mm-hmm.
even to this day, like what artists maybe in the early days things would get crazy, people would jump on stage, but usually when they get, 10, 20 years later, fans aren't going to be doing that. But it still happens to Morrissey, yeah, every show pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is really rare or unique, I think.
It is. Yeah, I think it is. I think there's something, the Smiths and Morrissey, there's something different about that music. And I think that that's maybe why. There's really no other sound like that.
Yeah,
Other people have tried to imitate that, Morrissey's singing style. But it's really hard to do it, right? And
yeah.
yeah. Why do you think, when you talk about younger people, being at these shows too and getting into this music, what is it about Morrissey and the Smiths that continues to be so enduring?
Uh, let's see. Well, I think the spirit of his music, um, still he still embodies that. Uh, like I do hear of kind of parents with their children, their children are kind of become fans. So maybe it's kind of a generational thing where it does get passed down almost. Like when I was kind of growing up, like it was hard for me to connect to older generations of music. Like I understood why people like say the Beatles or something, but I could never really get into them as much because they weren't around, I guess. Like, so it was hard for me to get excited about it as much to go back and kind of listen to those albums, but they're not really around, so I couldn't really get excited, I guess. But I think because Morrissey's been continually touring and putting out music, people can still kind of, even if they are late or born after the Smiths started, they can still feel like it's kind of current, almost like that it still means something. And I think the songs are also just in general timeless. So I think once they discover it, the younger fans would still appreciate it and be. I thought there would be maybe some more younger fans, but I think there are still some, that do appreciate it. But I always thought, someone's going to come along and create who understood technology maybe a little better than I would create something like a site or some sort of Twitter. I guess there are a lot of like Twitter type things, but there's still nothing like my site, I don't think, for information. So it's kind of a mix. Yeah. We have still the older who are still very into it, but trying to bring in newer people, but I feel like it is harder because the Smiths are legendary, but it is further back in time now. So sometimes, we look back at the 80s. That's like 30 something years now, 40 years almost. Yeah. That's a long time.
Yeah. We don't have to talk about how long ago it was. But I think though there's something about that too. Like the sound of that music is very timeless. It's hard to place if you don't know what it is, because when you think of 80s music, you think of synthesizers, or you think of bands like, hair bands like Motley Crue or something. So, and those bands sound still good, but dated. You can kind of, you can identify where it's from right away. But, I started getting into the Smiths in the 90s, as I mentioned earlier. And in the 90s, it wasn't cool to like stuff from the 80s. And except if you like the Smiths, you were allowed to like the Smiths because they were kind of the cool 80s band, right? Because they didn't sound like all the other 80s bands. So there is something, I think, that makes them easy to kind of slip in and out of different eras.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were from the 80s, but also, kind of against the whole scene of the 80s. So that's right.
Has running the site for all this time changed your perspective on Morrissey at all, or do you feel the same about him as you always have?
The same.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, like all the details. So it's like, give me some details, or give me some more. It just keeps going. Like can't get enough. Like I just say, like I guess I haven't changed in that sense, right? Since I was first discovered them in high school, I'm still as interested in what's going on, what can I learn, what's coming up next. It's I think his creativity just keeps going, like in different ways. So there are some controversies we talked about, but even that is still interesting, right? Like it's like can he survive this? It's a tough time even right now, but he's still doing well. He's still touring. He can sell out shows. So yeah, I think I'm not alone. People are still interested and just fascinated, just as they were before.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you look at this almost as though you're an observer, right? You're a fan of Morrissey, but you're also observing what he's doing
yeah,
and what this music is and where it's coming from and where it's
right.
going. Yeah.
True. It may have been, yeah, that personal controversy I had myself. I kind of separated it almost. So I'm more of an observer now. I don't really go to that many shows just because I'm not really welcome, but I'll still. So that, that whole thing is just kind of vague to me. Like, I don't know if you can really ban someone. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so I might go to a show. I might not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I am more of an observer. I don't really post in the forums. It's more of a just kind of reading and keeping things in order. So yeah, I just like doing the website and enabling a lot of comments, and a lot of the people who post are really informative and interesting, and a lot of collectors also. There's a lot of information on things like that. So much better than anything I could really contribute. So yeah, I'm kind of just a general keeping the site running and really just interested in the whole thing and reading a lot on it still. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really, it sounds like it's not so much an homage to Morrissey. It's a space for the fans. You're facilitating this community for
Mm,
people, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
I always said, yeah, exactly. It's like, it's as much about Morrissey as it is about the fans. So yeah, definitely
Hmm.
from the fan perspective. And that perspective, I think, is really interesting and really something Morrissey understood early on. Hopefully he still does.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's kind of unique too. Like some artists will talk about other influences, but I don't think not like Morrissey. Like if you go on my site, I added a wiki section, which is kind of a Wikipedia software. But we have a list of influences. So we've kind of, uh, a moderator and myself have kind of worked on gathering all these influences that he's mentioned, and we're still working on it. But there's hundreds. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting to connect all that together, and to actually see it in sort of a wiki. That's kind of an expansion of the site with the wiki part. I think is more informational, just kind of bringing in a lot of information that might be spread out around the forums and site information. So I think it's a good resource for as we go over the years and add more to it. It's going to be um, a really kind of the place to go for information on Morrissey, and just to see how much depth there is in him. Um, so yeah, so just that in itself, I think, shows how much there is. Like you can have a whole Wikipedia on Morrissey's world with a lot of pages and a lot of interconnecting information. So yeah, uh, it's kind of like writing a book in real time almost, right? Like
Hmm.
the way we're documenting it. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I appreciate that you're interested in it. I had
Yeah.
done some interviews, many years ago, but I haven't really, no one's really been too interested. So, but yeah, I keep going. I think it's
Yeah.
a resource. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and also really impressive to run something for so long, right? I think that's, the consistency of it um is interesting, and yeah, the archival process too that you're talking about, right? Because yeah, like you're saying, it really becomes a historical document in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or aim,
Yeah.
right. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So David, where can people find your community if they're interested in checking it out?
No, just go to the website,
Hmm.
https://morrissey-solo.com
Okay,
is the
great.
best place. Yeah, I don't really do a lot of social media or anything like that. I have kind of links to the feeds, um, but yeah, I'm not too active on myself on social media. So the website's probably the best place
Okay.
to go.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, David. I really appreciate chatting with you. This has been great. And thanks to everyone for tuning into the podcast today. I will talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Forever 80s podcast hosted by Liz Worth, where we talk to fans, artists, collectors, and more about all the things we love about the 1980s. If you like this episode, let us know. Hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.